technology. My name is Alisha, and I'm super excited. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be guiding you through this panel. I'm sure most of you would agree with me that when it comes to emerging tech, not everyone necessarily needs to be able to code like a pro, but having a broad understanding of key concepts will give everyone a huge advantage regardless of their background. And so we want to start by discussing buzzwords around AI, the metaverse, Web3. So please join me in welcoming our panelists, Alica, Yash, Hrish, and Jacob. We're expecting Jacob online. Oh, there he is. All right, amazing. Jacob is joining us from New York, and I'm super proud to share that Jacob, Alica, and Yash are Berklee alumni. So welcome back, guys. I think we just briefly start with a short introduction. Hrish, why don't you start?
Sure. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Hrish, Lotlikar. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Superworld. Superworld's a virtual world covering Earth. It's all around us and enables anyone to create, discover, and monetize anything, anywhere. Yep, and previous to Superworld, I started Rogue Initiative Studios, which is a film, television, gaming, and virtual reality studio in Hollywood. My co-founder had produced Call of Duty, Modern Warfare series, and Ghost, the video game. My partner is Michael Bay, the action director, who's known for Transformers, The Islands, Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, big action movies. And what we do there is we do cross-platform entertainment across film, television, gaming, virtual reality, so franchises. Previous to that, my background's venture capital, investment banking, and management consulting. Grew up in Houston, but live as a global nomad, so live all over the world. I've got 2 kids. One of them's right over there. They're all going to be here in the audience. Eva over there has lived in 28 countries already. So we live all over the world, and we love the world. So that's what Superworld's all about. And we'd love to celebrate music in Superworld.
Amazing. Alica, what about you?
Hi. Nice to meet you all. I'm Alica. I have founded a couple companies. One was a creative agency focusing on mixed reality experiences for different artists. We've worked with pretty much all the major labels. One of the coolest artists we've worked with was Glass Animals for a couple like Instagram filters, augmented reality things. After that, I founded Zone, which is a virtual world building platform for mobile. And I was the COO, was handling the product development, that kind of fun stuff. And I currently work in blockchain, so kind of covering all the different new technologies one by one, and focusing a bit more on user experience and really like the technical aspect of building and managing a product.
Great, Yash, go ahead.
Sweet. Hey guys, I'm Yash. I am a writer, researcher, accidental founder. I run Spectral. It's a content studio for founders and VCs in Silicon Valley, and we help them tell compelling stories about the future of humanity, the future of technology. So yeah, excited to be here.
Jacob, what about you?
Hey everyone, just let me know if you can hear me okay. I think the tech team said everything.
Perfect, we hear you perfect.
Beautiful. Yeah, so I graduated Berklee in 2020 along with Alica. We were the COVID year, which had its own unique opportunities and a lot of challenges and everything. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland originally. I got a pretty standard, business finance degree in college, and then realized I wanted to pivot into the music world. So I ended up at Berklee. While I was there, I managed Disruption Records, the student record label. And worked on a bunch of other really cool projects, thanks to and in spite of COVID in a lot of ways. And then from there, I've worked in artist management. I consulted on charter schools and worked in education a little bit. And now I work as an optimization manager at Sony. So it's we can definitely get into all of that further into the session, but it's a lot of marrying the current technological capabilities of a lot of these social and streaming platforms with kind of the cultural moments of viral TikTok trends, major performances like Usher playing the Super Bowl or his Vegas residency, and just generally helping our artists capitalize on big releases and anniversaries.
Right. It's amazing to see how all of you managed to integrate technology into your professional careers. Yash, you're a visionary entrepreneur with a vast background in both music and tech. When it comes to starting a business, can you share with us what is a minimum viable product, an MVP, and why is it crucial in the realization of a business idea?
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously, like as someone who has like shiny object syndrome, and someone who pursues a lot of ideas, very quickly I realized that it's super important to have some kind of a framework to validate ideas quickly. And frankly, like I've been playing around with this concept. I mean, the definition of an MVP is pretty fluid at this point, but I do think if I were to define it, I think it's more of a process, right? So I think like getting people to pay for your product is extremely important. There's this great book called The Mom Test by Rob Fitzgerald, and he kind of talks about like, you have all these customer interviews, right? Like when you're like, before you're launching a product, you kind of go and talk to a bunch of customers. You're like, oh, like if we build this, would you pay for it? And everyone's like, oh yeah, of course we'd pay for it. And then you build it and you send it to them and they don't pay, right? And a lot of people will say, oh, I love your product. And these are like literally friends, family, my mom, she's like, oh, this is amazing, right? But the truth of the matter is if someone's gonna actually pay for it, and that's very important. So like even if you can build out, or even if you can create demand, so almost be like, here's a Stripe link, like literally send people Stripe links over WhatsApp and say, this is what I'm gonna build, and see if they pay for it. I think and it can be $15. It need not even be like, I think people obsess a lot about like, oh, I'm gonna build this thing out, I'm gonna offshore like it to devs, I'm gonna have like this app and I'm gonna, distribute it across whatever. But the reality is like, you just wanna see if people are gonna pay for it. So I'd keep it very simple. Just ask people if they pay for it. And that is the true test of whether your thing has any value or not.
Right.
And as someone who's like built things, a lot of them fail. Like, I mean, a lot of the thing is like, everyone wants builders to succeed. Everyone wants founders to succeed, right? It's a thing, like, which is why people say nice things when you're building something. When you tell your friends that, oh, I'm like starting this company or I'm building this product, people are like, oh, wow, that's amazing. And suddenly your identity gets tied to it. But if they're not going to pay for it, you're really like, it's a delusion at the end of the day. So it's a very risky kind of thing. So I'll leave it at that.
As you said, it's sort of far from perfect and just the first draft of testing if there is a demand for it. And I think, Jacob, we talked about this earlier this week. You've also been part of a really great project around MVP creation. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this past year, I participated in a global catalog innovation challenge, for better word, like we can call it that, I guess. Basically, they took submissions from all over the world, probably like 150, 200 or more, just basically a sentence or two, like kind of the elevator pitch for an idea. They went forward with probably 24 or so. And then we had to actually build out minimum viable products for our ideas. And I think what was really interesting about that as an example in this case is we've had everything from, extremely technical solutions, like very internal, very in the weeds of, the operations of our business, like, oh, how do artists get paid? How does our content metadata get tagged? And then we have things that are much more fan oriented and outward facing. How do we engage super fans is of course a huge priority for all the labels and indie artists these days. Thinking about how do we incorporate AI into more, personalization? How do we just generally activate fans around the streaming activities and behaviors that we know tend to create the most engagement and retention? So what that led to was, the MVPs were entirely different. Some were pure technical demos. Some actually sourced some funding and went to third parties to have, a solution developed. And in other cases, we're not able to launch a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign, but we're able to kind of identify those sandbox opportunities. Where can we create kind of a micro representation of this marketplace and prove to them that, even with all the resources in the industry, a lot of majors are still very risk averse and want to really see the proof before they're willing to throw all of their weight and backing, and especially their brand names and their artist brand names behind them.
Mm-hmm. Talking about majors, can you maybe share with us what big technological trends are currently being integrated into record label structure?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we kind of touched super quickly on a couple. I think AI is permeating every facet of operations of labels, music companies, beyond, of course. That can be anything from how do we, streamline our rights management infrastructure? How do we, automate a bunch of processes that are currently very manual, very time consuming, very, resource intensive? There's the piece that I spoke to on personalization. How do we make, large, massive, unimaginable data sets actually work in our favor and create extremely niche and nuanced, personalized experiences for people? Some other pieces are, how do we, monetize fandom? A lot of that is platform-based, investing in, first-party data, own communities, trying to take away sort of, the Instagrams and TikToks of the world's sort of grip on the value chain of communicating with your fans. That's such a crucial part of kind of the discovery process, the promotion process, and at the moment, a lot of music companies are kind of backed out of that relationship. We don't really have that at the moment. So those are some big ones for sure. We're always looking to partner with companies. We're looking to acquire them. In some cases, we're looking to actually take our information and license it to them for maybe training purposes. Things like generative AI models are extremely morally dubious in some cases, where ethical training has kind of become the number one priority, it feels, this year. But then we also have things like content protection, where, how do we make sure that our artists are getting the most, fair compensation for all of their works that are being used out there, especially when, everyone's doing sped up and slowed remixes or Jersey Club remixes, or things that, these programs just aren't built to track.
Right. I think we're just at the beginning of integrating these technologicals into huge constructs that have existed for quite some time. Alisha, I'll move to you. You are head of user experience at Index Corp, making crypto more accessible and secure through decentralized platforms. Now, I'm pretty sure not everyone in the room is familiar with decentralized platforms versus centralized ones. Can you just briefly explain the difference and how decentralized platforms are changing the way that you approach user experience?
Yeah, for sure. So I think decentralization is still a bit of an early topic. Not everybody is aware of it happening, and it's currently, to be very honest, not the best user experience. And the reason for that is that the way decentralized platforms are built are that not one company owns the content or the digital assets. And so it's like a distributed network that owns it together and makes decisions together, so that what we call the blockchain. You've probably heard of Bitcoin and a couple of things there. But there's many more opportunities to it than just finance. For example, distributing ownership to fans, permissionless transactions and decisions that somebody can make without one entity controlling it or being able to rug pull. So for example, when we see now the news of TikTok maybe being banned in the US, what are all the creators are going to do? Because TikTok controls their own front end and back end, and they just say, okay, it's gone, in the worst case. So with decentralized platforms, what can happen is that there is a decentralized back end, and nobody can really decide to just pull that content away from creators. They really truly own their own content, And there are social networks, there are financial networks. So there's a bunch of different use cases. In terms of user experience right now, I have to look at this kind of technology being pretty nascent, and everything that's being built is pretty difficult to navigate, especially for a user, because it's like new technology. It's like the beginning of the internet again. And so everything that happens with the user right now has to be signed by a wallet. So when you click a button and you say, I want to buy this, or I want to listen to the song, you have to sign a transaction. So there's always like an additional step. And if you think about user experience in general, you always think about the user journey. So, okay, I look at this page, I click on this button, what happens next? And you always try to make the steps as low amount as possible. So in the blockchain world, there's always a little bit more steps than in the non-blockchain world. But if you really believe in this concept of decentralization to empower like the individual for ownership specifically, which is very relevant for the music business, then I think it's worth like developing it and trying to make the user experience better and better. But it's definitely a challenge in my position.
What would be some of these challenges? Can you just elaborate a little more?
Yeah, for sure. So, for example, when we were building our startup zone, it was a partly blockchain-based startup. We were kind of trying to do everything at once, doing like virtual worlds, doing blockchain all together. And when users were coming into the world, they had to have a wallet, and they couldn't just go to like a social media and say connect with Google. That was very difficult to achieve without drawbacks. So yeah, we had to kind of go around it and say, okay, log in, give me your email address, and now make a wallet. And so there was this additional step and this additional hurdle for people to potentially jump off instead of actually going further and seeing the experience in the end.
Interesting. Hrish, you have a similar background to Alisha in the sense that you worked in virtual environments for quite some time, and specifically also for working in user engagement through augmented reality. Now, this is where everything gets a little more crazy. Can you share a little bit about how you're using augmented reality to change and impact user experience at Superworld?
Sure. We've been in this space at Superworld since 2017 and got into the virtual reality space with Rogue Initiative in 2015. And it's remarkable how much that's changed even in that small space. There's definitely so many people have been in that space for 20 years now, and in the last 6 years since the Oculus acquisition by Facebook and their investments in the space, I think more and people are getting into these technologies. And I think there's certain inflection points that have happened even in the last few years with COVID and people realizing that they are benefiting from more compelling ways to access content right around them. And Apple this year released Apple Vision Pro, which I'm sure most of you have either seen or demos of or tried. And that is, again, a huge acceleration point in our appreciation of spatial computing, right? And, I think so, first of all, it's really about education. Because I remember when we started Superworld in 2017, I used to talk about virtual real estate, and it was, super crazy, let's say, right? And now people are like, okay, I get it, spatial computing, that's what that is. Or a lot of people look at me and like, oh, that's the metaverse, right? Back then they didn't even have a word for it, and now that spatial computing's here, we understand that computing can take place in environments around us. We see it, right? We see the ability to manipulate the air around us and to interface with a computing network, right? And so, I think part of that is people's realization, their practice, their ability to see it. I remember my mom during COVID called me and was like, I get Superworld now. You know what I mean? And that was big for me because I was like, wow, she's 85, almost 85, and she's now thinking that it's not such a crazy idea that people might want to be a little more virtual in their lives, right? And so, again, I think that second part of it is making it really easy to use the technology, right? Which she was talking about with user experience. How do you make it easy? What we want to do is democratize everyone getting into AR. And that's what Superworld's about, right? Is like, how do you get them from, I don't know what AR is, now I do, how do I use it? But I don't want to buy a headset, right? I just want to use my browser. Can I do that? Yes, you can. You can do that in Superworld, right? And so we want to get them like to make little, tiptoes into it. And one of the things that we found, which is pretty remarkable, is virtual real estate. A lot of people still have no idea what that means, right? And then those who do are like, wait, I can become a stakeholder in a real world location, and now I have, all of the benefits of the spatial computing that happens there. And so that's another way that we've found to get them into these technologies, is giving them ownership, back to Web3 and being a stakeholder in a community, right? And then I would say that the third thing is really, access to certain devices. Now, a lot of people would say, hey, look, spatial computing is not really going to come into its own until everyone has a headset that they can wear on their eyes. And I would agree with you that you can use your phone right now in Superworld or other platforms to visualize things, or the web, and that really gets everyone in. But when we are wearing very, very light glasses that everyone has, where you're interacting in augmented reality in a real world space, that's when you can see some of these things, and that's when they becomes very tangible for people. So I'm very excited about the inflection points, the education that's happened over the years, and now the hardware and software that's really coming online.
Right. You mentioned so many interesting things, and I want to pick up on the point of the metaverse. I'm super curious to hear from the rest of you about your experiences with the metaverse. Would you want to share, Yash?
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I was kind of helping one of my clients formulate his thoughts on this, like his investment thesis on this, and like, sorry, I have a sore throat, so I think like a big challenge till now, like I think like the Vision Pro really showed people that like with good hardware, like you can kind of unlock a new paradigm for some of the stuff. Before that, I mean, I tried the Oculus. Obviously, it's pretty fucking amazing. I mean, it's great, like but there are some like, I think people don't want to wear like Hrish said, right, like a heavy headset on their heads, and there are a lot of like, I think the main blocker is like hardware. Like even with the Vision Pro, like I see a lot of people have all sorts of setups, like where they're like wearing their headphones, but they have the Vision Pro, and then they have their Mac in front of them, and they're trying all sorts of combinations. And a lot of memes there, obviously, like on the streets of SF, people in their Vision Pros. Yeah, I think like if we kind of unlock hardware, which it seems like, I mean, if you just think about, I mean, the Vision Pro is not perfect, obviously, but it's pretty good. And if you look at the first iPhone, it was pretty clunky as well, but it kind of unlocked a paradigm. It's almost a mindset shift that spatial computing and this kind of stuff is possible. So I'm very excited to see, and then paired with some of the stuff that's happening in crypto, and I think it could be really interesting to see what like status games come out of it, especially with like virtual real estate, with some of those things. I don't think we've had a moment yet. Like I'm not sure NFTs they haven't clicked yet, if you know what I mean. But that doesn't mean the technology sucks. The technology is pretty profound. It's just that we need to figure out the consumer application layer that's like the most compelling, and it's gonna happen. But the question is how. So there's gonna be a convergence of a lot of things, right? Like good hardware, better UX in some of these virtual worlds, the ability to own some of these digital assets, and almost like, like making microtransactions easier, stuff like that. If all of those things converge, I think we could see some pretty exciting consumer apps and hardware, actually.
Definitely. Jacob, have you tapped into the metaverse at all?
We're working on it. I mean, I've definitely worked on a few of the major projects. I think the way the majors have approached it to this point is pretty like flash in the pan, like let's create the biggest spectacle with the most investment possible.
Right.
I think that's at least so far been the approach. Like when you think of like Travis Scott in Fortnite, Lady Gaga in Fortnite, like all these Roblox like worlds that people are creating, those take millions of dollars and sometimes years, or maybe up to a year in some cases to develop. It's pretty time and resource intensive. but it feels like, to Yash's point, like it's always kind of clunky at the start. Like everyone needs to figure out like what's the appropriate application for this new technology. How do we kind of leverage the cultural moment where fans want to become producers and creators in addition to consumers and create this more, like cyclical feedback loop. And I think where it's moving, at least for us, is how do we create more consistency in the metaverse?
Right.
How do we build things that aren't just one-offs? How do we enable people that really rely on the digital space, or maybe younger gaming audiences, to kind of know where to find them more regularly? And I think a lot of people are starting to do that with virtual avatars are becoming extremely advanced, creating their own, basically like turning their streaming space maybe into like an AR or mixed reality, or even fully virtual space. There's ways where you don't have to do a brand new, the Sphere style spectacle every time. Like there are ways to make it more personable and engaging and accessible.
Definitely.
But we're not quite there yet. But we'll get there, yeah.
We are. We're definitely.
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
No, just to make a micro point here, I think we often talk about like some of the exciting use cases, like we're talking about like consumer use cases, but frankly, a lot of these technologies profoundly change like enterprise use cases, and the solutions are very boring. So nobody wants to talk about it, right? Like rights management and like metadata and standardization, that kind of stuff. Like it's not like so. I feel like a lot of the benefits and a lot of the interesting stuff is happening there, So yeah, anyway, it's not like, it kind of stirs away from some of the buzzwords, right? Like it's fun to talk about like an AR headset and like, weird wonky characters in the ether, but sometimes it's boring.
It's exactly what I was going to say, is when we heard the term metaverse for the first time, or AR, or these goggles, we all went crazy and thought it was this life-changing thing, which it is, but it is taking time. And we see that these things are still a little funky at times, and so we will progress slightly. But Alisha, I know that you are the founder of a metaverse platform called Zone. Did I pronounce that correctly? Yes. Which is super cool because it allows anyone with a smartphone to create their own virtual environment. Can you share a little bit about that, how that works?
Yeah, for sure. So we originally started in augmented reality as well, where anybody could like spawn a portal and then walk in and then like walk around the room, but you had to walk in the real world. So it was like, okay, safety hazard if you're on the street and you're like just looking at your phone and walking around. And also it was just not a replicable user experience. Like people don't want to do this on the bus. They don't want to do it several times a day. It's fun once, but it's not, like you said, repeatable. So what we merged this with was just kind of like a fully virtual world, pretty much like a mobile game where you have a little avatar and you can walk around spaces with like joysticks on the phone, just because where the tech's at right now, that was where we thought we can fit in and make it actually fun. So the way it worked was we did one fun activation with Universal Music and Easy Life. They're an artist from UK and are going to have a different name now, so yeah. So what we did was build a world for them, which was kind of the album artwork, like the house that was on the album artwork, and then it was kind of a one-off fan activation, and the fans could come in and they could like walk around the house with their little avatars that they created, and then they could see the motion captured band like play the song and explore different visual assets from the album inside different rooms. And then the next step was kind of, okay, this was fun, they could look at this, they could be immersed, take like screenshots with their avatar, but where's the co-creation, right? So what they could do is like collect furniture and collect like little items that they found everywhere, go back to their own space and then make like their own room in the style of the artist. So what the platform is doing like now with users, where they can be in their room, they can invite friends, and they can display all the different assets from all the different artist activations that they have found or earned, and kind of display their fandom and their identity that way. The vision is a bit more exciting than that. It would be probably with like spatial type of hardware, where you are actually in your real world space, and then you can, place objects in your room. But that's just really, really hard to achieve technologically, because imagine mapping your room and having like the pictures on the wall, but then your friend wants to see it. So now, is it a virtual space that is your space, or is it your friend's space, but then, their walls are not as far away from each other as your walls? So like there's a lot of just challenges with getting the user experience to work out in that way.
Definitely. I've been giving a sign that we are slowly running out of time, and I want to make sure that we leave some questions, some time for questions. Are there any questions in the audience? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, hello. So this question is motivated actually by what we've seen with LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT, in terms of how it affects the creative process and creative output in text and written output. And I'm trying to understand if you think we will see the same results with music. So to preface it, my colleagues at UCL, some of the research that they've been doing and that's been replicated in places like Harvard and Wharton shows that when people write text, you run a randomized control trial, right? You get half of participants to do something without AI and another group to do something with AI, for instance. People in the treatment group, people who use AI, would sort of come up with ideas, so written ideas that would be more novel, more useful, have higher business value, and they'd find the process more enjoying. They'd enjoy the process more. But I think it's going to be a bit difficult and tricky with music for several reasons, because there are ownership problems. There's a lot more complexity involved because there's different media involved. How do you think, when it comes to music generators like Udio and Suno, how do you think that would change the creative process? And do you think we'd see the same sort of results for music as we've seen in text?
Love the question. I mean,
Sure.
I have thoughts, obviously. I was actually writing about this afternoon before coming here. I mean, you've used Suno, right? I'm assuming. I don't know how many people have used Suno. It's pretty insane, right? And it's using autoregressive models right now. So it's essentially like a sequence-based thing. So given like the first 3 notes, what's the most probable 4th note, right? So and it'll just do that like, so it's statistics basically. I think it's going to be very interesting. Like I think like the democratization of music creation is exciting, and this is obviously not a sentiment shared by everyone. I think it's very exciting. I mean, the parallel I usually use to kind of put this in context is like there was a time in history where writing was reserved for specific people, right? So you were a king, and like you literally dictated your thoughts to a scribe, and that person wrote because they possess the technical ability to write, so to speak. And I think everyone can write now, obviously. I mean, most people at least. And I think that's a net good for humanity. And the same way, I think like democratizing the technical aspects of music creation will be a net good for humanity. That's my perspective. Of course, like people have different perspectives here. I do think it's going to be meritocratic, truly, where like creativity matters, right? If everyone can basically manifest their ideas in musical form, then the true competitive plane is like creativity, right? Who has the best ideas? And a world where the best ideas win is a good world, you know. At least, that's what I think about this. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that what we're doing is we're going to be entering a period of time where IP holders and their audience are going to be able to engage with each other in ways to not only to enlarge the scope of that IP by enabling users to be able to create new IP using the existing IP. And you see this with Bored Ape Yacht Club. You see this with certain NFT collections that allow you to own the IP. But as an example, what we're doing in Superworld is we're enabling everyone to create a world, right? And those worlds intersect with the brand's world. So a brand might have a world, right? And me as a user, I can go into that brand and say, I love that, and bring it into my world. So now when someone else comes into my world, they're like, wow, this is amazing. And then they discover that it's not actually mine, it's from my favorite brand. But guess what? Maybe I've done things with that content that have made it more contextually present for my world, meaning my preferences, right? So I'm able to, within the brand's permission, be able to potentially change that IP, and they're creating environments for users to do this. You see this with Artifact being acquired by Nike, and Artifact started off as a company just creating shoes, right? Digital shoes, and now Nike's using that to engage their fans to be able to again change their IP in ways that their fans love, right? And so I think the usability of this functionality using generative AI to do that in a more democratized way is just going to increase what all of us as stakeholders of a brand can do, because we all can't get a Kanye West to join us or a Pharrell to join us if we're a brand, right? But if you are a small brand and you have a Shopify store and you're like, you know what, Yash over there has some interesting ideas. I'd love to see what he would do if he was the owner of this brand. I know some of you, you engage and you're like, man, I wish they made a product like that, right? That's going to be instantaneous. You're going to be able to scale that. And we're already working on that in Superworld.
Amazing, and it's just going to get bigger and better, I'm assuming. Thank you so much, guys. We've reached the end. We're running out of time, but this was amazing. Please give a round of applause to our panelists.